Welcome to session 150 of the Bible in a Year commentary. If you started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 30th of May. Today we'll be looking at Job 40 to 42 and Psalm 145. But so far in Job, we've read through the prologue, the first 3 rounds of speeches, Job's final monologue, Elihu's speech, and started God's response. We read as Job was exalted as a model example of a righteous man. God held court with his divine beings and heard reports, including the report of the Satan. Think of this as a job title rather than the big bad guy of the Bible. The Satan asked the question, was Job genuinely righteous and faithful, or was he just behaving that way because God was blessing him? So God puts this theory to the test, removing all of his blessing and favour from Job, and leaving him alone and with a body full of sores. But despite all this, Job didn't sin or turn from God. He did, however, lament his situation, crying out that it would be better if he hadn't been born, and asking God why he won't just let him die. To begin with, Job's friends choose to sit with him and mourn with him, but then they started to rebuke him, leading to the first round of speeches. Eliphaz started off gentle, praising Job for his past wisdom and pointing out that God is just and punishes the wicked. Either Job is innocent and God will rescue him, or he is guilty and deserves what he gets. Bildad claims that Job's children must have been wicked, and that's why they were punished. He argued that we can see that those close to God flourish and those far from him suffer. Zophar then jumped to accuse Job of mocking God, saying that Job should be grateful because he deserves worse than what God is currently doing. Responding to them in turn and then as a whole, Job argued that he has every right to bring his case before God. God will do what he will do, and Job is willing to accept that, as long as he can speak to God himself. All these friends want to do is correct Job and hold on to the box they put God in. They don't want to comfort him or challenge their own assumptions about how God works. This started round 2 of the speeches, where the friends get harsher. They doubled down on what they've already said and explicitly blamed all of the bad things happening to Job on Job and his children's wickedness. The friends wanted to hold on to their narrow, dogmatic understanding of God, while Job is wrestling with the nuance that comes from lived experience. For round 3, Eliphaz started making up sins he assumed Job had committed. Bildad just defaults to God can do what he wants, so deal with it, and Zophar doesn't even speak. Job then started his monologue, where he wrestles with the nuance that God does sometimes support the righteous and punish the wicked, but sometimes he doesn't. He also declared that wisdom can only come directly from God. Job grieved his old life that was gone and his new life that is full of suffering. One last time, he called out to God to hear him and point out any sins in him, and then Job stopped talking. Elihu then joined the conversation. Younger than the rest, we got a sense of Elihu's puffed up pride. He rebukes Job for his complaints and the friends for not being able to answer Job. After spending a lot of time not saying much, he starts to build an argument that sometimes God allows people to suffer, not to punish them, but to keep them from sinning. He tried to answer Job's questions, but either didn't say much of anything at all or inadvertently supported Job's position. Finally, God bursts onto the scene and pointed Job to creation and all that includes. God pointed out that the universe is so much more complicated than Job could fathom. There is no way Job could ever fully appreciate what it is like to balance all of those and keep the world spinning. So let's jump in with today's reading, Job 40 to 42. Job responds to God, recognizing his insignificance and promising to be quiet. This might seem like the right response, but actually it looks like Job hasn't learnt the lesson God is trying to teach him. In his many arguments, Job had pointed out that God is too great for anyone to defend their case, so why bother? But submitting to God involves leaning in and bringing all of yourself to the table. It's not pulling away and shrinking away from your frustrations to appease God. So God gives another speech. He once again challenges Job to prepare himself for what he is about to say. God tells Job to restore himself, humble the proud, and deal with the wicked. When Job can do that, hint, he won't ever be able to, not fully, then God will allow Job to justify himself. God then picks up a similar line of argument from his previous speech, pointing Job to creation. But this time it is with a twist. God points to 2 creatures, the Behemoth and the Leviathan. There's been a lot of debate about what these creatures are, but when we look at the context of the time that Job was written in, we see that these creatures were great and fearful mythological monsters that the other nations believed in. These beings represented chaos and destruction. So why would God point Job to mythological monsters? It serves as a metaphor. God is saying, you see these terrible monsters that these other nations and even their gods are terrified of? I created them. I have authority and control over the things that the gods of the other nations are scared of. Those gods wrestle with these beasts. I created them. They are my pets. So let's look at these creatures. The behemoth is likely a super ox. It's huge with bones of metal and tail the size of a cedar tree. The behemoth can climb a mountain or cross great rivers. Would Job like to try handling one of those? Because God can. He created them. The Leviathan is a sea monster. The version we read about in Job, because there are various different descriptions of the Leviathan, is like a giant crocodile creature that can breathe fire and whose skin is tougher than any sword, arrow or spear could pierce. Again, God asked Job if he thinks he could handle a creature like that. Could Job fish one out of the sea? The implication is God could. Job may not see it, but God is fully in control of all the chaos in the world, even things as powerful and chaotic as the behemoth and the Leviathan. And at this, Job is content. He declares that he can now see that God can in fact do all things, and that none of God's plans will fail. Job has questioned God, and God has answered him. Before, Job had heard about God, but now he can see the goodness of God with his own eyes. Job has finally got what he desired, to feel God close to him again, and to hear his voice. God then turns to Job's friends and condemns them. They have spoken poorly about him, trying to box him in with their personal theology, while Job has spoken rightly. Now, we know that there were times that Job didn't speak rightly about God. Some of the things he was saying about God when he was at his worst were just plain wrong. But through it all, Job was expressing how he was feeling and was begging God to come and prove him wrong. This is why God says Job has spoken rightly about him. God cares less about us proving our theology right and more about us taking our troubles and bringing them to him. God then demands Job's friends bring sacrifices and gets Job to pray for them, which they do. God then blesses Job, restoring to him the things that were lost. So 42 chapters later, what is the answer? We've been wrestling with Job around this question, why do bad things happen and wicked people prosper? The problem is this, the book never answers the question. It does so intentionally. It wants to direct your attention away from trying to understand the world's problems and towards letting your problems lead you to God. All our frustrations and complaints exist to push us back to God and to wrestle through them with him. And that is the book of Job. Now let's look at Psalm 145. This psalm is attributed to King David and falls into the category of praise psalm. Here is a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of this commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. We start with verses 1 to 2, I will bless the Lord. Verses 3 to 7, you are worthy of praise. Verse 8 to 9, the Lord is good. Verses 10 to 13, the Lord's works and his kingdom. Verses 14 to 16, the Lord satisfies. Verses 17 to 20, blessed are those who trust in the Lord. And verse 21, I will praise the Lord. The psalmist starts with a declaration that they will bless the Lord. They will praise his name forever. Why? Because he is worthy of it. He has done mighty acts that are shared from generation to generation. He is majestic, which is something the psalmist meditates on. The psalmist will declare of the Lord's awesome deeds to others, and they will celebrate the Lord's goodness and righteousness. He is a gracious and merciful God. His works are good, and his kingdom is glorious, lasting forever. And he satisfies those in need. He lifts up those who are falling or bow down. He gives food to his people and satisfies their desires. Those who call to him, he is near to. Those who fear him, he fulfills their desires and hears their cries. Those who love him, he will watch over. But the wicked, those who don't call to him or fear him or love him, those he will destroy. And so the psalmist ends with praise. The psalm celebrates God as king. He is king over all the earth, and all people rely on him for provision and protection. Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.